Motoring 94 is brought to you by Quaker State. Quaker State, one tough motor oil. And Midas, for brake, exhaust, suspension, and steering service. Trust your car to Midas.
You know, they say there are only two things that you can depend on in this life, and that is death and taxes. Well, I'd like to add car shows to that list. Hello, everyone. You know, you can bet that at the end and beginning of every calendar year, the car shows will make their tour across North America. It's a great opportunity for consumers to get a look at all the new automobiles under one roof. Well, this week we're in Barrie, Ontario for what is being described as the largest outdoor car show. But as you're about to see, this is more than a car show. This is a classroom.
Oh, yay! Oh, yay! Oh, yay! We welcome you to the 1993 Georgian College Auto Show and invite you to come and take a look at the alternate fuel display in the South Field. God bless the automotive industry.
Georgian College is home to the Canadian Automotive Institute, the only automotive college in Canada. Called Wheels in Motion, this show was organized and run by business administration and automotive marketing students, and it's the largest outdoor show of its kind in Canada.
It started back in about 1984, and it started off primarily as preparing students for dealerships. So it had a dealer focus, and there were 45 students in the program. They were almost all dealer sons, DKs we call them. But since then, we have over 400 students in the program now, English and French, male and female from every province across Canada. So it's grown astronomically. And the students are not just dealer sons anymore. They just have an interest in the automotive industry. They're here to learn the management aspects of the automotive industry. So it's a business administration program primarily, but they have courses in marketing, accounting, and finance, and core automotive courses to prepare them for management opportunities within the industry.
It's the, I guess, largest classroom experience or student lab that you'll find anywhere. It's been going on for 8 years. The inaugural year was in 1986, which I guess had some growing pains, and it's come a long way since then. And now we have nearly every major manufacturer here, along with special displays. It was tough getting the manufacturers involved in the beginning because they didn't really take us seriously. They saw it as a classroom project, nothing more. I mean, now it's evolved. It's a huge community project, and it's a huge event that's supported by all the manufacturers. If any one of them didn't support it, they would really not look good to the other ones. So they all give us a lot of support. And in turn, they're helping out themselves because they're preparing us to go and work for them.
This particular one is 23,500, so it's still pretty good for the money. It's got supplemental airbags and dual anti-lock brakes in the back.
All the small pieces on it, you know, you've got your cup holders, you've got all the natural amenities that people look for in a car, but it's capable of doing the work of a truck.
7 pouces.
And top, yeah,
Comme la Viper aussi, la 17 pouces, du 335 en arrière, la Viper.
Well, there's 3 levels of students here today. There's first years, second years, and third years. Starting off with the first years, they're the product ambassadors at each tent. They do the same job as salesmen do at regular auto shows, but except they don't sell. They all know about the product, they're showing it to people, they're answering questions, they're greeting people when they come into the tent. The second years are their captains. We've got 2 or 3 in each display as the captains and co-captains. They run that display. And then the third years, there's 4 of us, myself and 3 other guys. We're the executive. And we organize the show.
Well, they don't push you to buy a car anyway. They just explain what they know about the cars, and that's it. And sometimes it's nice because I know a little bit about the cars, and it's sometimes nice to know that they also know much more than I do, and they can explain a lot. And I like to learn about them anyway.
Would you buy a car after coming here, you think?
Yes, definitely, because of the information that I gathered anyway.
It's really nice, the style. I mean, the way these things... A lot of people ask me, you know, how much you're making off this, or who do you work for, this and that. But on the most part, they're pretty receptive towards what you say because they know, most people know it's a no-hassle environment here. You know, we're not pressuring people to buy. we're just asking them to take a look at our cars, and that's about it.
Where would you like to be 10 years from now in the automotive industry if you had a choice?
If I had a choice, I'd like to own my own dealership because I like this style of business, the one-on-one with customers. But I don't know, any facet, I think. It's only my second year here in the college, so I got one more year to sort of hone out what I'd like to do, what I'd not like to do. But this is a lot of fun. Even the way the spoiler system goes, it allows the air to rush by.
Sometimes they surprise us and know more about some of the vehicles, especially our competitors, so it's quite nice, yeah. So they're very eager.
Do you hope to sell cars while you're here too?
Oh, well, we already have, actually. Some of the cars have been sold as they were really interested in the vehicle and they found out which dealership they came from, and we did sell some vehicles. Yeah, so we're very happy about that.
Well, this is one of the first chances I've had to get a good look at this new Dodge pickup truck, and it's kind of nice to be able to look without being descended on by a bunch of salespeople. So the students are really doing a good job here, and they're really knowledgeable, and you know, it's a really good show. A lot of room to move here too. You can sort of, you know, distance yourself and look at the vehicles, whereas, you know, you go to a big show like the Toronto Auto Show, inside a building it's pretty tight, and, you know, doors are open, hoods open. You really can't get back and get a good look at the cars. So it's a good show. I'm really enjoying it.
We're hoping that, I mean, we don't have to really hope for this. We know, in fact, that all the students are going to walk away from this knowing a lot more about what goes on in the retail automotive industry and having some first-hand experience. Also, we hope to get some recognition for the school, too, because this is the Center for Excellence for training of the automotive industry.
Test Drive with Graham Fletcher.
About a year ago, we road tested the Volvo 850 sedan. Now, I was so impressed with that vehicle that I gave it our Family Car of the Year award. Now, this is the 1994 850 wagon, a vehicle that comes with more than a few surprises. The new 850 wagon is a fairly attractive package. The only area I'm not stuck on is the rear end. It still sits too upright and appears too much like a hearse for my liking. Now, while I realise it's difficult to do much with the rear end if you want to preserve practicality and interior volume, but there must be some way of sprucing up the image. When it comes to safety, few cars can rival the Volvo 850. Start with Volvo's Side Impact Protection System, or SIPS. It dramatically reduces the risk of severe injury in the event of a T-bone type crash. Add to that dual airbags, front seatbelt pretensioners, anti-lock brakes and traction control, and things don't get much safer. One of the nice features with the Volvo 850 range is the Lindsay chair, as my daughter calls it. Now, this booster seat is incredibly handy if you have young children. The other surprise is this pooch-proof net that sits at the back here. Now, it stops Rover from leaping over and dancing all over the kids in the back seat. On the highway, the ride is supple and comfortable. The front suspension geometry is designed to prevent dive under braking and lift upon acceleration. Now, it works well because during the brake test I noted very little nosedive. The brake system uses discs all round and a 3-channel anti-lock setup. During the brake test I hauled this heavy wagon to a halt in just 112 feet from 80k. The stopping power on this new wagon is as impressive as the pulling power. One of the nice surprises about the new 850 range is this new turbocharged engine. It produces 220 horsepower and 221 pounds-feet of torque. The nice part being that you have access to the majority of that torque all the way from 2100 RPM right the way through 5000. That ensures beautiful throttle response right throughout the operating range. The engine displacement and compression ratio are both down to accommodate the Garrett turbocharger. There is virtually zero turbo lag. In fact, the only time it is noticeable is off the line. Once you hit 20 kilometers an hour, performance is superb. In the dash to the 100k mark, the Volvo required just 8 seconds. Now that for a family hauler is something to write home about. Matched with this beauty is a 4-speed automatic that allows the driver to select one of 3 modes. The economy mode promotes early upshifts and better fuel economy. The sport mode makes the best use of the engine's power, and the winter mode locks the tranny in third gear, minimizing wheel spin when pulling away in icy conditions. Combine the latter with Volvo's new electronic traction control system, or TRACS, and Old Man Winter is not to be feared. The track system itself is of the low-speed variety, meaning that it becomes inoperative above 40 miles an hour. There is an override switch on the dash allowing you to turn the system off. Now this is an important feature on any traction control system because there are times when you must actually spin the wheels if you're going to get free and back on your way. The other point of interest with the transmission is that the lockup converter operates in both third and fourth gears. This gives them an extra ratio to play with. The suspension is comprised of McPherson struts up front and Volvo's patented Delta Link system in back. The beauty of the Delta Link is that it imparts a small amount of passive four-wheel steering. Factor in the 16-inch 50 series Michelin tyres and you end up with a wagon that has a crisp, responsive feel, a feel that has more in keeping with a sports car than a family car. My pet peeve on the Volvo has to do with the switches on the dash. Now, without exception, when you turn the system on, they light up to tell you that that function is on. Now, that holds true for all of the switches except for the AC. It lights up to tell you the system is off. Now, that contradiction defies logic. The dash is a very comprehensive analog affair. Here you can pick up all the information one requires right down to the boost being supplied to the engine. The bottom quarter of the instrument panel houses all the idiot lights and an information center that is, like the majority, less than informative. Arranged vertically in the center of the dash are the heater controls, which feature heat controls for both driver and passenger, and a great sounding radio that comes complete with a cassette player. The really nice part being that all the controls are large enough to operate with gloves on. Now, many other manufacturers could learn a lesson from that given our winters. The front seats are well-shaped, comfortable, and feature 8-way power adjustment complete with a 3-position memory. This means that the driver can find and preserve that ever-elusive perfect position. This new 850 wagon offers everything the sedan did, only more so. You get better power, better performance, and certainly much better versatility, the latter making it an interesting alternative to a minivan.
We're back at the Wheels in Motion Auto Show in Barrie, Ontario. Now, the last time we saw Bill Gardner, he was checking out this Ram pickup truck. But believe me, Bill was here to do more than just look at automobiles. In fact, from what I hear, he was talking to the students about computers.
Brad, I can't believe you fell for that line about the computers. I just told you that so I could bill you for that trip to Barrie. What I want to talk about this week, though, is how computers interact with the sensors under the hood. Remember I showed you that computer last week that in most cases lives inside the car. Now it has to be in touch with a number of sensors under the hood in order to run the engine very efficiently. And those sensors are located on the engine or around the engine. For example, this one here is called the MAP sensor. That stands for Manifold Absolute Pressure Sensor. It's basically a vacuum sensor. We're going to have a look at that one pretty closely today. Now, some of the other sensors are the throttle position sensor. There's a coolant temp sensor located on this engine where you can't see it. There's the mass airflow sensor. And we have emission control devices like this EGR valve that the computer is running as well in order to make this engine run very efficiently. Now, on pre-computer engines, we had things like distributor vacuum advancers, weights inside the distributor for centrifugal spark advance. We had things like power valves in the carburetor, accelerator pumps, choke circuits, etc. that gave the engine the proper amount of fuel and the proper spark timing for most of its load and fuel requirements. But on today's engines, we're doing that with electronics. So let's have a look at how a typical sensor does its job with a computer. The computer applies 5 volts to this reference line right here on the sensor. The middle line that I've tapped into with the alligator clip is the return wire to the computer, and that voltage is going to vary. It's going to be something below 5 volts, and it's going to be variable according to how much our engine vacuum is. This third wire is a ground wire, and over here there's a port, and I've attached a vacuum gauge, a handheld vacuum pump and gauge to that line, and I'm going to simulate a couple of typical engine conditions. Now, typical engine idle would be a vacuum reading, something like we've got there, and you can see that we've got significantly less than 5 volts. That's roughly our signal, return signal to the computer at idle. Now another typical engine condition is acceleration. We're going to have lower vacuum, somewhere down around that level, and you can see that the reading has changed accordingly, and that's going to tell the computer to add fuel for acceleration. Or that could be a high load condition like bucking a serious headwind or towing a trailer. Now another typical engine condition would be deceleration. For example, we're coasting down a hill and we have higher than idle engine vacuum. We've got an extremely high vacuum reading now, and you can see that the sensor feedback has changed to a very low reading, and that's telling the computer knows that we're decelerating going down a hill. We don't require very much fuel, so it cuts back the injection accordingly. So what's the bottom line on these computer-controlled engines? Well, like them or not, they've allowed us to achieve levels of performance, economy, and pollution control that we never could have achieved on those non-computer run engines. They're just simply that much more efficient. The same thing that computers have done for many other businesses. Till next week, I'm Bill Gardner for Motoring 94.
Last year, Volkswagen celebrated the 40th anniversary of the Beetle. This year, the party continued in the Toronto parking lot of Volkswagen Canada with the 3rd annual Great Canadian Bugfest.
In 1990, Mr. Grant Rutland, our organizer, went to the president with an idea to run a bug show. Due to the years that the Volkswagen was produced, Mr. Weiler thought it was a great idea and decided this was it. And this is how the show originated in 1990. In the last 2 years, we've managed to get it to the point where it is today with 250 entries.
I think the best thing about them is just the way they look. There'll never be another Beetle. It's been the classic car, and it'll always be the classic car. Like, you see a lot of old cars around, but when you see a Volkswagen, everyone's head turns. And the way they smell, the way they sound, if you've ever driven one, it's a totally different experience.
I have worked for Volkswagen for 27 years, but of course I was a mere child when I started. I think everybody would give you probably a slightly different reason for it. I think it's almost become folklore. It's been encouraged by such films as Herbie the Love Bug, and I think everybody had somebody in their family that once owned a Beetle or one of the Volkswagens, and they've always been known for their reliability in getting people through, and despite all kinds of weather, particularly here in North America. And I think they just become part of people's families. And as you can see, there are a lot of young people here who are just as enamored as the people who were around when the cars were first put on sale here in 1952. So it's just incredible. I think even though I've been associated with the company for so long, it still amazes me.
The Frankfurt Auto Show was the stage as Chrysler unveiled its newest entry in the subcompact market. The 1995 front-wheel drive Neon with standard dual airbags will replace the Dodge Shadow and Plymouth Sundance. Chrysler has high expectations for the Canadian market.
The whole market segmentation that we're looking at in Canada for the Neon is very, very important to any company. In terms of the subcompact car market in Canada, we're looking at something in the order of 66% of that whole market is subcompact, as compared to in the U.S. where it's almost reversed. The first year we're looking at somewhere in the order of some 30,000 plus vehicles for the Canadian market.
The Neon will make its Canadian debut in early '94. It's expected the price will range from $11,000 to $15,000. After visiting over 150 cities, Mercedes-Benz has selected Vance, Alabama for its $300 million assembly plant. Although its parent company, Daimler-Benz, announced it will be cutting its workforce by 40,000 in 1994, the company believes its new plant will cost 30% less to operate than a typical German plant. The new plant will produce a sport utility vehicle. It's Mercedes' first passenger vehicle assembly plant outside Germany.
Our Midas tip of the week concerns getting the maximum life out of a clutch system. A very important place to start is with the clutch adjustment. Make sure there's always the correct amount of free play. If it isn't there, have it adjusted. It's a fairly simple mechanical adjustment in most cases. Another important thing to remember is not to ride the clutch after you've made a clutch or shift operation. Get your foot off the clutch and position it aside. If you ride the clutch or rest your foot on it, it'll wear the release bearing and possibly make the clutch slip itself. Another tip is to kick the car into neutral at a long set of lights, or if you're stuck in traffic. There's no point in having it in gear with the clutch depressed. That'll save wear and tear as well. Another thing that you'll find useful in driving a car with a standard transmission is if you get into the habit of holding it on a hill with the emergency brake. That's a stressful situation. When people pull in behind you and crowd you, you don't want to roll back into them. So after you've selected first gear, rip the emergency brake on to hold that vehicle from rolling back. When you see your opportunity, bring the clutch in slowly, bring the RPM up until you feel that thing under load, and then release the emergency brake, and away you go. Now, it's something you'll probably have to practice to get the timing and rhythm to do that, but once you've got it down, it really helps you. That's your Midas tip of the week.
Over half of all new Ford Aerostars are leased, not sold. I guess these customers never knew my father. My views on leasing when I come back in Kenzie's Corner.
Kenzie's Corner with Jim Kenzie.
My daddy used to tell me that if something seemed too good to be true, it was probably neither good nor true. He also used to tell me that if you can't afford to pay cash for something, you just can't afford it. And that's why I'm a little bit skeptical about this business of leasing a car. Now, leasing's become very popular in recent years, and not just with business customers either. The theory is that since you're financing only the depreciation of the car over the lease period rather than its entire value, your monthly payment is lower. Alternatively, you can lease a much nicer car for the same monthly payment as if you're buying a cheaper model. That's why BMW in particular has done very well with leasing in recent months. But at the end of the lease period, you don't have a car, so you're never out from underneath that constant monthly payment. If you're prepared to hold on to your car and maintain it well, you'll save money by buying it in the long run. Now, leasing also poses some dangers for the car companies. That monthly payment's based on what they expect the resale value to be in a couple of 3 or 4 years' time. If they miss that calculation, they get their brains blown out. That's what happened to Porsche when the resale value of the 944 collapsed after the stock market crash of the late 80s. So, I don't know, if I gotta buy a new car, I think I'm gonna take my daddy's advice and just buy it, even though my financial advisor would probably tell me it doesn't make sense to own a depreciating asset. Besides, I can't find anybody who'll lease me a 1976 American Motors Hornet. I'm Jim Kenzie.
Well, that's it for another edition of Motoring 94. Before we go, we'd like to congratulate all the students here at the Canadian Automotive Institute at Georgian College in Barrie, Ontario, for putting on another successful Wheels in Motion auto show. And you know, while the automobile industry produces the cars, it's the people who sell them. And pretty soon, these students will be entering the workforce. And that can only prove to be a winning situation for both the industry and maybe more importantly, for the consumer. Next week, we'll be in Southern California to celebrate an anniversary. Make sure you join us as we bring you more stories about cars and the people who drive them.
We've talked to editors, we talked to Mustang owners, non-Mustang owners, Ford owners, non-Ford owners, you name it. What did you want the Mustang to be? What they said, they wanted a lot of heritage in it. They wanted it to be a North American product. They didn't want it to look Japanese. They didn't want it to look European, but they wanted to have the safety and the performance that people expected in the 90s.
Motoring 94 has been brought to you by Quaker State. Quaker State, one tough motor oil. And Midas, for brake, exhaust, suspension, and steering service. Trust your car to Midas.